So the purpose of the space station is to do science up there. And I think every one of us that goes to the station feels this very, very strong responsibility to make sure that we do the science and we do the science correctly, because we understand that people put years and years of their lives into thinking of the experiment and contemplating how to do the experiment and designing it and getting it through the processes to get it flown. And so we all take that very seriously. But our payload training process can be optimized a little bit more to help us be more successful on orbit. And it's interesting because the people who own the science and own the experiments and want to train us, they're very enthusiastic about their science experiments, as they should be. But I remember I sat in a payload training course where they went through every single step on how to change a battery on the front of the experiment. That was sort of their backup data thing. It's like, I don't need to be trained on how to change a battery. I know how to change a battery. Let's talk about the science and where the important parts, where the critical parts of the science experiment are. What makes this unique? What should I not mess up? What's really your critical data comes from here. I need to understand that. Some of the mechanical stuff about how to fasten a piece of equipment down and what tools to use to connect it together, that's part of the general skill set that you should get. I should be able to read a procedure and assemble something. But if in the process of assembling the science experiment, if it's really critical that this lens is exactly placed, and if it's off a millimeter or two, it could mess up the science experiment, that's the information I need to know, and the information of how to set that critical piece up. We do a lot of payload training that is sort of repeating the generic skill set. So it really needs to focus on the keys. And then you have the timing problem, because you're learning some of these things so far before flight that you forget them just because of the total amount of information you're putting into your head. It's very easy to forget some of that stuff as you get to the point where you're doing the experiment. So you need to have that information available again when you're setting up the experiment. And you go like, oh yeah, it's because, for example, oh yeah, I remember we had this conversation, this lens is really critical, let me review why. And that's what you want to have, are those hooks to remember the unique stuff about the experiments. And that can be a video, that can be talking to the PI on the ground. I found it extremely useful to be able to talk to the principal investigator, the person who designed the experiment, while I was setting up the experiment and actually performing the experiment. That is extremely efficient. And I was very helpful for them to have video of what I was doing. So those kinds of things can be very useful. But having a moment before you do the science experiment to review and look at the unique things that are related to that are very helpful. And then the other thing is I had to do an experiment on board that I wasn't trained on at all. It was a soldering experiment. We had some extra time at the end of our mission because the shuttle was getting delayed and they weren't sure how long, so they were filling it with some kind of experiments that had been backed up. And both Mike and I did the experiment fine, and we did it by watching the video. There was a video that they had made of each step in the procedure. And quite frankly, we didn't read the procedure. We watched the video, we would do the step, we'd watch the video, we'd do the step. And that's how we did the whole experiment. And they were happy with the results. So I guess that would lead you to a conversation about how do you convey best to the crew the information they need to capture these unique things with the experiments. And I understand the need to have procedures that are sort of standardized, but we can't get so far into following the letter of the law that we forget the spirit. So we have to find out where that middle ground is having a standard set of methodologies for how we convey information to the crew without locking ourselves into a methodology that's awkward for all purposes. There are times when I would be reading a procedure and it would have so many notes and warnings and caveats that I know just looking at a picture would make it instantly clear to me. And so we have to make sure that our system where we train people is flexible enough to look at the different ways you can convey information and use them flexibly and not force everyone into this, thou shalt write things exactly like this, while still maintaining a standard. So there's a happy medium in there we have to hit, and that will be very helpful too.